Hey, it's Matt from Black Coal Woodworking. Today I'm making a lidded bowl and scoop for sugar. To start out, I cut 2 squares of 2x4 and a longer piece as well. And that longer piece is going to be for the scoop, but I have to make that piece a square also. That way it fits on the lathe a little better. I'm going to use a screw on my lathe to attach the pieces of wood. So I gotta drill a hole. I use my drill press for that, but you could use a regular drill, and I do too if my piece is too big. This is a little guy, so it fit nicely. After I got that mounted, I grabbed my bowl gouge. It's a 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and I made this thing round. The wood gets really smooth when you rotate your bowl gouge most of the way over. Cuts really clean. Next was to face up that bottom of the bowl and to create the profile I wanted. When I was happy with the profile, I grabbed my diamond point tool and I created a foot so that I could grab it with chuck. And then I needed to make the bottom of the bowl and finish that up. So I always recess the inside of it so that the bowl only sits on the outer rim. And I did that with a spindle gouge, and then I flipped over back to that diamond point tool here to kind of make that sharper recess on the foot there, and then to do some final shaping on the bottom of the foot as well. I had some skid marks I had to clean up. I didn't film this part, but I sanded up to 320, and that's why it's shiny. There's no finish on that yet, that's just sanded. Right about here I got a brilliant idea. Figured I'd make this bowl a little bit more interesting and add some lines on the side. Just 2 of them. That way it's a little bit easier to make it look like I lined them up. Didn't know if I'd add a third if it would look that nice, so here's 2. The finish I'm using is walnut oil and beeswax, 2 parts of each. Normally I make a finish like this with 1 part beeswax and 3 parts liquid, but I find that this is a little more durable maybe. And for sure it's easier to apply because I can just grab a chunk of it and just rub it on the wood like that when it's spinning. And then I can grab a paper towel and use that to burnish it into the wood and melt the wax and all that so that it gets deeper into the wood pores and just works nice and feels nice. So the lines I made weren't really enough for me. I wanted to get them to burn, so I tried a couple of different things, a screwdriver, a punch. All I really ended up doing was taking the wax out of those holes, which was probably what I needed to do anyway. But then I found a scrap piece of wood that I had cut at a 45-degree angle, and I stuck the point of it into the groove, and it worked. It worked great. I ended up burning away the point, so I had to keep using fresh corners. But other than that, it was good. I accidentally burnt the second line more than the first, so I had to go back, but I actually like that. A little bit darker is good. Added a little more wax to that just to seal that in there so you don't get lines on your hands. For the inside of the bowl, I really just hollowed it out like any other bowl. Except that I made the outer rim a little bit thicker because I've got to cut a bit of a notch in there for the lid that I want to add to this. I tend to check the thickness of the bowl quite a bit as I'm going. Just helps make sure that I don't go through the bottom or make the sides too thin, and I want it as even as I can all around. I gotta say that I don't really care to check the thickness of the bowl with my fingers while it's spinning. I really don't care to have a sliver slammed into my finger. I used a 1/2 inch bowl gouge to empty the bowl out there, and then I switched to a round nose scraper just to do some cleanup and final shaping. I used the diamond point tool again to create that ledge I want for the lid to sit on. Finishing the inside of the bowl is exactly the same method as the outside. On to the top. This is also mounted with a screw chuck, and I first just make it round. That's a really nice way to start because then I know what kind of material I have to work with. I'll face out that front again, and then after that I needed to mark where I wanted my handle so that it's just easier if I mark it out and I don't overshoot something again. In case you're wondering about the two sets of lines, these two lines are only because the first one wasn't really wide enough after I'd taken a step back and looked at it. Through a series of pull cuts, I shaped the lid the way I wanted to. It's always nice to get those little angel hair noodle shavings. I measured the inside of where the lid would go on the bowl, and then I transferred that to the lid. You kind of see a faint little line there. And then I used my 1/2 inch bowl gouge to shave the wood down to about that line, being very careful not to go over it. But as I kind of made the side walls of that lid shorter, I just could reshape the top a little bit more because it just made more sense with the new diameter. To make the final shape of the little handle, I used my diamond point tool again and just sort of poked it in there at the angle I wanted, and then used the other side of that diamond point to blend the rest of the top into the new shape of the bottom of that little handle. I find that a freshly sharpened diamond point tool does a lot, especially when you look at this top part of that handle. It really got smooth, and it's just so much easier to cut when you sharpen your tools regularly. Sounds like a crazy idea, I know, but I had to learn the hard way, so here we go. On the side, as you can tell, I'm just now trimming down to that final diameter, and the reason my arm keeps getting in the way is because I keep trying to put the bottom of the bowl on the lid. So it does help me kind of line things up, even though I know it won't section fit in there. I almost forgot to add the finish, but thankfully I did. So then the top of the lid will be done. Almost. I did decide to add a couple more lines in there and use my little 2x4 trick to burn that in, because I want the lid and the bowl to have some elements that carry across each other. What I did was I put tape on this and tape on this and glue between the two. See how well that sticks. After pushing on it a little more, it just felt really soft. I partly think that's because I've already waxed the lid and the bowl, and so the tape just isn't sticking very well. So I added some more glue just to make sure I didn't miss anything else, and then went ahead very carefully. As you may tell, this part of the video is sped up quite a bit. I went really slow, hoping that thing wouldn't dislodge, and thankfully it did not. When I was shaping the lid, man, I had so many skid marks, it wasn't even funny. So I ended up having to reshape the rim of the lid just a bit, take it down a bit so that it's clean. Alright, so I got the tape off of this guy. Turned out pretty good. Turned out I forgot to wax the inside. Ooh, goody. See how it fits. Oh. Just a hair tight. This little bit of scraping with a diamond point tool is all I had to do to make this thing fit better. I don't know if that's enough. Oh yeah. For the scoop, this is a piece of 2x4 that's about 1.5 inches square. I'm just using my skew chisel to get it down to round. To hollow it out, I'm using a spindle gouge. I did most of the hollowing off camera because not even I can see inside there when the hole's this small. Once I'd finished hollowing, I did mark out the outer edge of where I can cut as to not cut this thing off so that I can start working on the handle. And I started with the skew chisel just because it's an easy way to make a nice clean cut. Then I switched over to the spindle gouge again and did some shaping on the back end of the scoop just to bring down the thickness a bit. Once I was happy with the actual scoop part, I started on the handle and used the spindle gouge to bring that handle down to size, and I kind of did that the same way as I do a top. It's almost exactly the same. I did a quick test fit to make sure everything was to scale, and then continued on the handle. The back part of this handle just sort of happened. I knew I wanted something bigger on the end, but as soon as that little bulb appeared, I was like, oh, that's it. I also knew that I wanted to put 2 lines somewhere, just so I could make it match the rest of the bowl. I did those off camera, only because my camera didn't record when I thought it was. Now for the part I was trying to figure out, how am I going to get this thing off and make it look nice? I thought for sure I'd need some more space on the back, so I opened some up, and then I just kept shaping around the back end. And eventually, once I got it small enough, I grabbed my skew chisel and just used it to kind of snip it off or cut it off. To finish the scoop part of this thing, you obviously need to cut something away. And in this case, I'm using the belt sander to do it. I'm using a 60 grit paper on it, and I just really push it into there to make sure that I cut away all the wood I want. I do this at the edge of the belt sander, so if I slip off, my hand's going to go more away from the grit than it will toward the belt. It worked pretty good. The only thing I wish I had done better was to go thinner on the scoop itself, on the hollowing out. Didn't quite go thin enough, so I had to deal with that in a different way. I used a file to get it a little more thin around the edge. After that, I marked out on the lid where I wanted this to go in. I knew I wanted a notch there, so I figured I'd take out the little pith, and I just used a file to do it. This didn't take long at all, and it turns out that file is the perfect size for the scoop I made. And I had all these grand plans of using some kind of electric tool. Didn't need it. Here's the finished product. Fits in there so nicely. If you're wondering why my sugar looks so dirty, it's because it's half white sugar and half coconut sugar. We're trying to get healthy. The lid does have a suction fit. It's not too tight, so it is easy to take out. And the scoop holds an okay amount of sugar. Again, probably the less sugar, the better. Works pretty good. Hey, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and share it with your friends. It would really help me out. Thank you.